Who was Pablo Picasso? Written and illustrated by True Kelly. Who was Pablo Picasso? If you think about modern art, Picasso is probably the first name that pops into your head. Art today wouldn't be the same without him. Pablo Picasso had a very long and interesting life. He lived through 2 world wars, the invention of electricity, telephones, radio and TV, movies, automobiles, and airplanes. As the world changed, he was able to change with it. Picasso made all kinds of art and plenty of it. He worked hard every day for more than 80 years. Some people say he created 50,000 pieces of art. He must have had tons of energy. He made paintings, posters, sculptures in stone and metal, ceramics, drawings, collages, prints, poetry, theater sets, costumes, and more. Picasso kept thinking of new ideas. He was creative and skilled, but as soon as he mastered a certain style, he'd move on. As a result, the way he painted changed more than any other great artist. Unlike many artists, Picasso was successful and became famous quite quickly. He always knew how to attract attention. At 9 years old, Picasso was selling his drawings. By the time he died at age 91, he was the richest artist in history. Through his art, Picasso sent powerful messages about politics, society, peace, and love. Because of Picasso, the dove is considered a symbol of peace. And his most famous painting, Guernica, shows the horror and brutality of war. Picasso's art could be serious or playful, childlike or realistic, colorful or dark, simple or complex. When he was a child, he could draw as well as a talented grown-up. But the older he got, the more he wanted to make art like a child. Chapter 1. The Boy Wonder. On October 25, 1881, in Malaga in southern Spain, an art teacher and his wife had a baby boy. They named him after many saints and relatives. Pablo Diego José Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno María de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso. Years later that baby became known as the great artist, Pablo Picasso. How would he ever have signed his whole name on a painting? It would have been impossible. So he just wrote Picasso. Pablo could draw before he could talk. His mother said his first words were piz. Piz. That's baby talk in Spanish for lápiz, which means pencil. When he was really little, he liked to draw spirals. He would sometimes draw pictures in the sand. If he drew a horse, he could start from any point the tail or the leg and make a very good picture in one line. He could do the same with paper and scissors. Have you ever tried to do that? It's not easy. Pablo's parents wanted him to be an artist. As a little boy, he often went to bullfights with his father. Pablo's first known painting was of a bullfight. He was only about 8 years old when he did it. Everyone thought Pablo was an artistic genius and they were right. Pablo had 2 younger sisters, Lola and Conchita. Sadly, when Pablo was still young, 7-year-old Conchita died of diphtheria. The whole family was crushed. For the rest of his life, Pablo had a fear of death. When Pablo was 13, he had his first art show. By then, his father saw that Pablo painted better than he did. So Pablo's father gave his son all his brushes and paints and never painted again. Pablo and his family moved to Barcelona, an exciting city full of artists. Pablo was accepted to the local art school where his father taught drawing. Even though he was only 14, Pablo skipped the basic courses and went right to the advanced ones. He amazed the teachers. Pablo's career really began when he was 16. He did a painting called Science and Charity. His father and sister Lola were his models. Lola was shown sick in bed. Pablo's father posed as the doctor at her bedside. The painting was very realistic in style. It won a prize at an exhibit in Madrid. Pablo beat some of the best artists in Spain. Pablo's family thought he had a great future as an artist. They sent him to Madrid to study art at the Royal Academy of San Fernando. It was supposed to be a good school, but Pablo skipped class a lot. His teachers wanted him to copy other paintings and statues. He thought this way of teaching was useless and old-fashioned. He ended up spending a lot of time goofing off in cafes. He also loved going to the famous Prado Art Museum, where he saw the work of the Spanish masters El Greco and Francisco Goya. Pablo's life in Spain. Pablo and his family moved from Malaga in southern Spain, where he was born, to La Coruña in northern Spain, and then to Barcelona. After that, Pablo went to Madrid to study art. When he became sick, he went to the little village of Horta de San Juan. He later returned to Barcelona, but he couldn't resist Paris. In the winter, Pablo came down with scarlet fever. He left school and stayed in a country village until he got better. He had a lot of time to think about his future. Pablo decided not to go back to school. He also decided that he wanted to paint his own way. His family was not going to like that, but Pablo was restless and ready to be on his own. Chapter 2. The Young Artist. Pablo moved back to Barcelona, where he hung out with a bunch of artists, poets, and writers at a cafe called Els Quatre Gats, the Four Cats. They called themselves modernists, modern artists. In 1900, Pablo had his first one-man show at the cafe. There were more than 50 portraits of friends and family and another 60 or so drawings and paintings. One was a painting of a priest at the bedside of a dying woman. It was accepted for a show at the World's Fair in Paris. It was all Pablo needed as an excuse to move to Paris. An old art school friend, Carlos Casagemas, went with him. Carlos and Pablo had no money. Their apartment had no furniture, so Pablo painted furniture and bookcases on the walls. Then it didn't look so bare. He even painted a safe on the wall as if they had valuable things to put in it. But the apartment didn't matter. They were in Paris. It was the center of the art and fashion world. Paris was full of life, and Picasso was full of energy. He was seeing the art of Monet, Degas, Cézanne, Van Gogh, Gauguin, and Toulouse-Lautrec. Paris was so colorful, and soon so were Pablo's paintings. For 2 months, he painted Paris scenes. He sold 3 pastels of bullfights. That was encouraging. Pablo loved Paris. But poor Carlos was broken-hearted. His girlfriend had left him. So Carlos and Pablo moved back to Pablo's hometown in Spain. Pablo's family did not like what they saw when he walked in the door. The way he was dressed. And his long hair. They were sure he was wasting his life. So Pablo moved to Madrid. He helped start an art magazine. He did political cartoons for the magazine about the sorry state of the poor. He left behind his friend Carlos, who was still terribly depressed and difficult to be around. Soon Carlos Casagemas returned to Paris. He was at his wits' end. First he tried to shoot his old girlfriend. Then he shot himself and died. Pablo was in shock. He may have also felt guilty about leaving his friend in such bad shape. Carlos's death affected Picasso's painting. He painted 2 dark funeral scenes and 2 death portraits of Carlos. Then he began painting with the color blue. Pablo said, "It was thinking of Casagemas that made me start painting in blue." He did a self-portrait in 1901 that was mostly in blues. It made him look very sad. Later, this time became known as Picasso's Blue Period. From 1901 to 1904, Pablo moved back and forth between Barcelona and Paris. He lived in cheap hotel rooms and run-down apartments. Pablo shared one apartment with Max Jacob, a poet. They could only afford one bed, so Pablo slept in it during the day, and Max slept in it at night. Pablo worked at night, a habit that continued for the rest of his life. Because he often couldn't afford to buy canvases and paints, Pablo did lots of drawings. His subjects were beggars, blind people, lonely people, and prisoners. Pablo cared about these people. For models, he visited a women's prison in Paris. All his life, Pablo loved painting women. It was 1903. In only a little over a year, Pablo did 50 paintings using tones of blue and green. No one bought them. People didn't want to put such depressing pictures on their walls. Pablo's dad and a lot of his friends were sure Pablo was headed in the wrong direction with his strange blue paintings. But did Pablo listen? No. He did what he wanted. Chapter 3. Life in Paris. What made Pablo snap out of his blue period? Moving back to Paris this time for good was one cause. Lively Paris worked its magic on Pablo. He became happier. He started doing coloreal paintings of jugglers and acrobats in a traveling circus. They were all outsiders to society, just like the people he had painted in his blue period. Les Saltimbanques. Pablo worked hard on his painting, Les Saltimbanques, the family of acrobats. He used both Fernande and a friend as models for the circus family. X-ray studies of the painting show that he did the painting completely over 4 times until he had it the way he wanted. The other reason that his blue period ended was Pablo had a new girlfriend. She was a beautiful artist named Fernande Olivier. His happiness showed in his paintings. This time in Pablo's life is sometimes called the rose period, but his paintings had many colors. Not just pinks. Picasso's pets. Throughout his life, Pablo had many pets, including a tame white mouse, a tortoise, a goat, and a monkey. He was a true dog lover. When he was still a struggling artist, he had a big, sweet, old dog named Frika. Once when Pablo had no food, Frika trotted in dragging a string of sausages. His all-time favorite pet was probably a dachshund named Lump. Lump means rascal in German. Pablo painted Lump into his copy of Las Meninas instead of the noble-looking hound that Velázquez painted in the original. Pablo and Fernande lived in a big, run-down apartment building that was full of artists and poets. Their room was damp and a mess with lots of projects going on. Pablo didn't like to throw out anything. He said, "Why should you want me to throw away what has done me the favor of coming into my hands?" They had a big, yellow dog named Frika, and they kept a pet white mouse in a dresser drawer. Pablo liked to work at night by oil lamp. He often worked until 5 or 6 in the morning. In winter, the room was sometimes so cold that leftover cups of tea froze overnight. Around this time, Pablo was meeting lots of interesting people in Paris. He was interesting, too. He was intense and complicated. He could be very charming, and his curiosity, energy, intellect, and originality caught people's Picasso with friends in a cafe attention. Despite being short, only 5 feet 3 inches tall, he was very striking looking with piercing black eyes. He met a rich American woman named Gertrude Stein and her brother Leo. Gertrude was a poet. She had written the famous line, "Rose is a rose is a rose." She was one of the first people to really appreciate Pablo's paintings, and she bought some of them. Poets and artists met at the Steins' house in Paris on Saturday nights. Pablo met the painter Henri Matisse there. Pablo thought Matisse was the greatest painter of the time. "All things considered, there is only Matisse," he once said. Even though they were competitors, they became lifelong friends. Portrait of Gertrude Stein. In 1906, Pablo worked on a portrait of Gertrude. It was torture for Pablo because he just couldn't get her face right. She sat for the portrait 80 times. It probably was torture for Gertrude, too. Pablo gave up for the summer. In the fall, he painted in her face from memory. It looked like a primitive mask. Pablo had been looking at African and primitive art in a museum, which explains why. He was never afraid to borrow. People didn't think the painting looked like Gertrude at all, but she loved it. She said, "For me, it is I." After working on a portrait of Gertrude Stein, Pablo realized that he didn't have to paint exactly what he saw. He could paint what he imagined. This led to a turning point for